of the Huntington Beach community. And what we mean by that is the demographic housing profile, because it's an important thing that we need to talk about in terms of creating future housing policy. So, as part of the requirements of the housing element, we're required to look at these components of the population. And we wanted to share some initial findings that we have. This is just for informational purposes, and as part of the process and the update, we'll get into the details of all of this. And so you'll have plenty of pages of data and analysis to look at as we progress through this process. But when you look at the population and the makeup of the population and the community, you can see the majority of the folks in the community are white, but there is a variety of different ethnicities and races with the community that comprises who we are as a Huntington Beach community. And then as we move on to the next slide, we start to look at next slide, please. Sometimes you have to do two claps, I think, is when it helps. And then we talk about the households, and basically a household is a group of people living under one roof. And if you look at the pie chart you see on the screen, the majority of the households in the community, just over 50%, are married family households. You can see on the left there of the screen, the single family or single householder where no spouse or partner is present comprises almost 30% of the community. You can see non-family households and households that are age 65 and older. All of these have different needs. For example, family households may need additional bedrooms for kids and other portions of their family, or persons who are maybe 65 or older. All those kids have gone on to buy their own homes, and they may need less space. And so all of these different household types have different needs that we need to address in our planning for the future. Next slide. So if you look on the left of the screen, we see our population projections through 2040. So if we look into about 20 years down the road, we can see a trend from 2010 to 2040. The community has experienced a population growth in recent years, but it looks like that is leveling off, and in some cases being fairly steady into the future. So we look at that population change and how that's going to serve the needs. So if we're not growing in our population or new population, the existing population is going to age in place, for example. And there's policies and other implications as it relates to that. You see on the right side of the screen, the renter versus owner occupied households. So roughly about a 60-40 split, with the majority being owner occupied households. And you can go on to the next slide. And so what type of housing units are in the community? In Huntington Beach, the majority of those are single family detached. And this is a typical one house on one lot, your typical neighborhood type of single family residential development. But there's also a number of multifamily developments, and this could be apartments, higher density residential product that you see. And you see recently in recent years, some new construction along the coast, for example, where you see some of those multifamily developments that occurred. So you have single family attached, which is more than one unit on a lot, for example. Let's say like condominiums that you may see in the community, townhomes, for example. Multifamily development could be rental, could be a condominium, or it could be rental apartments, for example. And then mobile homes is another type of housing unit that you see in the community. And those are typically within mobile home parks, not single family residential spread throughout, but within larger developments of similar type of uses. So what about the age of the the housing stock within the community? The screen you see on the right, it's counterintuitive in the sense that we're traveling back in time as we go from left to right. So you can see that peak from the 60s through the 80s is when most of the development in the community occurred. And this is, post World War II construction boom that we saw throughout the country. And then as we get into the later years, we're starting to see a somewhat of an uptick in that new construction. So you have much of the inventory of residential development falls within that frame of built residential development, falls in with that frame of the 60s basically through the 90s. Next slide. So you might ask yourself, why do we need that information? Well, what we're doing is we're updating the housing element of the general plan. And so what is a housing element? It's a thing, it's a policy document. We'll go through and talk about there in just the next few slides. So next slide. So what is a housing element? Well, a housing element is a required chapter of the general plan. And if you look at state housing or state planning law, this is one of the chapters, or we call it in California elements, which essentially is a section of a document that expresses explicitly housing related policies and programs to address your current need within your community and expected future growth needs. So we look at what is today, the needs of our community, but then we look at into the future, we're projecting out what those growth needs are. And so we have to look at that in terms of not just the needs of the entire community, but the different income categories within that. So there's folks who may have make less of an income than other folks in the community, but all of those have a different need, and we have to address the spectrum of need within the community. What's unique about the housing element, it's the only one of the elements of the plan that actually physically goes up to the state, to Sacramento, and is reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development for compliance with state laws. And what we like to call the alphabet soup of assembly bills and Senate bills, there's many, many of those that address explicitly for the housing element. And we have to make sure, and the state helps us to make sure that the policy and the analysis and the work that we do for the housing element complies with all the new laws that have come out, especially since 2017. There's been about 67 or plus and counting. So we want to make sure that we're in compliance with what the law requires us to do. But what's most important about this process, it's about you. Is that about you as a community member, you as a stakeholder, you as an interested party in the development and change and management of that in the future of Huntington Beach. So your engagement, your ideas, your input into this process is very important. We're planning for your future. We want you to be engaged and involved in helping us to do that. And so that's what we hope to get out of you today. We have the big ears on, you have the mouse, so we want to listen to what you have to say this evening and future components of that. Next slide. So what is the components of the housing element, or what are the features or the sections within the element that we have to analyze and provide data and information about? The first component is the profile of population and housing. You saw a little snippet of that just in the few slides ago. Demographic information, things about the existing housing stock, the quality and the improvements and other things that relate to housing within the community. We also have to look at housing constraints. There may be limitations or things that are constraining the development of housing in the future. And there are two types of constraints. There's governmental constraints and non-governmental constraints. Non-governmental constraints could be things like interest rates or the access to lending and other financial components. Governmental constraints could be the rules and regulations that the city of Huntington Beach imposes on future development that would bring it to market, if you will. We also have to look at resources to address those. So if we have challenges, we have our housing needs, what are the resources that we can bring to bear to address those issues? So that might be funding, financing, programs, assistance, or other things, but also the land we have available to accommodate growth is a resource as well. We have to look at existing policies and programs. So the city has currently a adopted housing element that goes through October of 2021 of this year. And that's been going on for the last 8 years. And so we want to look at those programs and policies that had been previously adopted and see which ones have worked, which ones have not worked, which may need some massaging or some changes, which may not be appropriate and we discard them. And we also have to look at the needs of the new laws and regulations and requirements that we have to abide by and how those will relate into our policy program. So if you've ever heard the term hindsight is 2020, we want to look back at our past and learn those lessons of that work that we did. And so you'll see the policy program that will be in the future, maybe a combination of current existing programs, modified existing programs, and brand new programs into the future. One of the largest components of this process is identifying sites. And you see here on the second to the last bullet there, it says RHNA, R-H-N-A. We're going to talk to you about what that means. It's a regional housing needs assessment. But what we have to do as part of this process is we have growth needs or new development that we project into the future. And we have to show and identify sites that may be appropriate to accommodate that future growth. So it's a responsibility of the city, as required by the law, is to allocate and identify sites that are available to accommodate our projected future growth over the planning period. So when we wrap all of this up and we create this document, it really is a policy direction setting document. It's adopted by resolution of the council as policy. It's a policies, programs, objectives to achieve the city's housing goals. So it is a mission, it is a statement of actions, it is a whole host of policies, programs, procedures, and elements that as we move forward in the planning period that the city will address and implement to satisfy and or to implement those housing goals that we identify in this plan. Next slide. So the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, we affectionately call it RHNA. It's a process that every city and county in the state of California has to go through. And we wanted to give you an introduction of what it is. So as we go into the next slide, what is RHNA? Regional Housing Needs Assessment is what is initiating this housing element update. And so what the state of California does is they estimate what this whole entire state's growth needs are. And they do all kinds of crazy models, and a bunch of folks with PhDs are looking at a whole host of different variables like population growth, employment growth, access to transportation, deaths, births, and all of that to figure out what a projection is of growth throughout the region for this 8-year planning period that we're talking about, 2021 to 2029. And it quantifies that need by income category. So when we say we look into the future, we say we need this many housing units developed to accommodate the needs of this income category within the state, within the county, within its cities, within each county. So how does that roll up to Huntington Beach? And let's tell you that story on the next slide. So the State Department of Housing and Community Development, Sacramento, determines a region or a statewide number of growth. That growth is broken down by these regional councils of government. In the case of Southern California for Huntington Beach, it's the Southern California Association of Government. And so the state of California, in this case, identified a need of approximately 1.3 million units of new residential development in the planning period. And so what the Southern California Association of Governments does is takes that 1.3 million in this case, and they slice it up in the different pie slices for each of the communities and the counties within the region. So Huntington Beach is just one small slice of the 200 or so cities within the Southern California Associated Governments regions. And based on that, those slicing of the pie and the methodology that they do, the fair share distribution, or Huntington Beach's share of that growth, is approximately 13,368 units. So what does that mean? What does the 13,000 units mean? On the next slide, you're going to see a table. I'm going to walk you through this table so you understand it as best we can. And for those who are listening in, is on the left side of the screen, you see the income category. These are the state-defined income categories that we look at for all of the future growth needs. So it goes from very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income. And what is that calculated by? It's calculated by the median family income, or the middle point of incomes within the counties that that city resides in. So in our case, for Huntington Beach, it's Orange County. In Orange County, as of 2020, keep in mind this number changes and can change every year, but as of 2020, the Orange County median county family income is 103,000. So that's what we base it off of. And so you can see in the second column here on the screen, that gives you a detail of what percentage of the median family income. So for example, very low income is up to 50% of that 103,000. So in this case, a maximum salary of somebody, annual household income, of somebody in the very low income range would be up to 51,500. And you can see each of those different categories are a percentage of that median family income. Here's the distinction: is typically the very low and low, what we call the lower income portion of that, is something that does not necessarily, when you open the newspaper and you look for advertisement for sale, they're not what we would call market rate units. Whereas moderate and above moderate are something that you typically see on the market. If you went to a real estate magazine and looked at different units there, you would be able to see that. But the lower income usually needs a little more help or some subsidies or some other assistance to bring it to the market, if you will. If you look on the very far right of the screen, it says RHNA housing unit allocations. And that is the estimate of the total need in that income category that the city needs to provide the accommodation for, and I'll clarify that in a moment, provide the accommodation for in policy to grow in the next 8 years. So of that 13,000 units that we spoke of on the last slide, it's sliced in these little parts here of the different income categories. So for example, very low income, those households making up to 51,500, there's a need in the community for approximately 3,661 units. And each of those income categories roll up to that 13,368 units. Now here's a point of clarification it's important. It doesn't require the city to build these units, but what it does require, and all the policies will point to that, it does require the city to provide the opportunity for the private market to do that if it so chooses. So what that means is the city has to have the policies, the regulations, the zoning, and all of those rules put together to allow for that development to occur. Because the city is not a developer, they don't build housing units. What they can do is they can provide the assistance to help the market to bring those up to doorknobs that people can open and live in. And so if you go on to the next slide, the process of going through is not just about looking at the numbers and looking at the data and all of that. There's a back and forth with the participation, but you as a community. We're going to give you a lot of information that is really intended to provide a base of knowledge that will influence and guide policy. And it's not just about the numbers, but that's the head part of it. but there's also the heart part of it and the things that you as community members feel are important to you and that you want to provide your input. And that's why you're here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Molly to kind of walk through the engagement timeline and the process. And then we're going to turn it back right over to you and you're going to get an opportunity to speak. So we're almost done. So hang tight and we look forward to that. Molly?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah. So as you can see on the screen, this is a overview of the community engagement timeline. So we just want to, one, reiterate that it's really important that you participate and that the city gets your feedback and your input throughout this process. But we also want to let you know that this is not the only opportunity that you have to do so. And it's not your friends and family's only opportunity. So if you know someone who was not able to attend this workshop, there's going to be an online survey that will launch next week. That will be available in both English and Spanish. There will be meetings with the City Council and the Planning Commission, as well as an additional workshop, which is planned for early summer. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to come and share your ideas and input, and it's welcomed and it's required and it's needed. So we really encourage you to continue to engage in this process. So as Dave mentioned, there is time now for us to participate. So our first exercise is in the form of a live polling tool. So if you're not familiar, if you haven't done one of these yet, what you can do is if you have a smartphone available, or if you're joining us on a computer, you can just open up a new web browser. You would go to www.menti.com. Just type that right in to the web browser. And then it will prompt you to insert a code. So you'll go ahead and insert the code that you see on the screen, which is 22210240. So I'm going to leave these instructions up for just a moment, and then I'm going to switch over and present the live polling exercise for everyone today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up that polling exercise.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I could not see the last 4 digits.
Oh, no problem. I'm going to pull it up right now, and I will.
It'll be on the top
well, I
of your
can tell
screen.
you right now. It's the last 4 is 0240. So let me pull that up so you can see it. Okay, so at the top. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the whole code?
Yeah, of course. It's 22210240. And then it's also on the top of the screen. You can see at the very top, there's some instructions. So if you're still logging on, it's go to www.menti.com. And there's that code there at the top of the screen, 22210240. So as you're logging in, oh yeah.
Phone number ending in 6779, you had your hand raised. Did you have a question? Phone number ending in 6779. No, I think you're on mute. Okay. Let us know if you have a question.
Thanks,
sorry,
Nicole.
Molly. Yeah.
No worries. And just to let everyone know that this is going to be live for a little bit longer. So if you did call in today and you don't have access to a computer right now, you can always hop on later tonight and give us your input. But again, this is not your last opportunity. So we already have responses coming in. Our first question is a little bit of a warm up. In a few words, tell us about your housing experience in Huntington Beach. So yeah, just tell us about, maybe your experience looking for housing, the experience if you grew up in Huntington Beach, maybe you moved here from another city. What does that look like for you? I see one of the primary answers that's coming in is that housing is expensive. That's definitely not unique to Huntington Beach. It's an expensive place to live in Southern California. And a lot of cities are working to work with developers to increase those affordable housing options.
And Molly,
I see.
Molly, you can see when you're looking at the screen, you can continue to add these and it will change every time you add it in. But the larger the text, that's what you have in common. So if you see expensive, there's a number of you who've indicated that it may be expensive as your experience. So as you see those numbers change, The ones that are larger and more pronounced on the screen are the ones that you have in common with each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Dave. I also see challenges with walkability. So looking for some walkable options in the community. A lot of great experiences. We see excellent, varied over the years, perfect amount, positive but difficult. So, you know, the mix of feelings about opportunities for housing or maybe just experience with housing in Huntington Beach needs trees. So yeah, housing is not an echo chamber. It's tied to a lot of other aspects of a community. When we think about housing, we think about access to opportunities. We think about access to open spaces and green spaces, definitely important. I see a lot of responses coming in. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I see the the issue with the younger generation is we all have housing needs, and for the folks who are young and starting out, is it may be too expensive. So you may have a situation where you grew up and lived here your whole life, but you can't stay here because you can't afford it. So those are challenges that we obviously need to address in terms of the abilities. You can see here a number of you are starting to get a hang of it. So we're starting to see a lot of those issues, positive and not so positive in senses, exclusivity and access and NIMBYism issues, and the challenges with being LGBTQ friendly, for example, are some of those issues that are related to housing that we have to put into the consideration of this process. So
thanks, Dave. I see that the 6779 phone number has their hand raised again. If you do have a question, go ahead and come off mute if you're having trouble accessing the survey.
it shows you're unmuted, so if you speak, we may be able to hear you.
I'm so sorry if you're sharing with us. I'm not hearing anything. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. But again, if you're not able to access this will be open a little bit later. So you can do it after the workshop. Go ahead, Dave.
And we will save all of this information, so it won't be lost when we finish this. We'll save all of this information. You'll be able to access and see your comments into the future. And as part of the housing element, you can put your finger on the exact words that you're saying, so it won't be lost in the ether. You'll be able to find that in the future. So go ahead, Molly.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Lots of great responses. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next question we have. So our next question is, what are some housing challenges or needs in Huntington Beach? So Dave brought up that there's a lot of great experiences with housing in Huntington Beach, but people also noted some challenges or some issues that they've had in the city. Maybe that's access to housing, housing opportunity. Maybe it's not necessarily your personal experience, but your community's experience or friends and family. So share some of those challenges with us. What are some things that the city should consider as they update the housing element? How can we look at addressing some of these issues with programs or policies? The goal is to get feedback directly from you, the community, so that we can really shape the housing element to reflect those needs. So a couple coming in, again, building off of something that we noted in the first question, which is affordability issues. So not affordable for a lot of the community, not a lot of low income housing. Again, tying it back to that affordability. There's, let's see, waiting lists for affordable housing. Yeah.
Section 8, for example, in other county programs, and we've heard this throughout the county, is that knowing when you put your name on a list and the amount of time it takes to actually access that affordable housing has been a challenge.
Displacement, yeah, as more housing comes in, it's often market rate or less affordable to different sectors of the community, and so it pushes people out of the city. And like Dave mentioned, maybe you grew up in Huntington Beach or your family lives here, but you're just not able to afford to stay in the city. So displacement is a big issue. Protect pedestrian and bikers. yeah, thinking about how housing is tied to so many different aspects of planning for our community and planning for our future. We want to be thinking about mobility. I'm gonna scroll down as more responses come in.
Molly, you notice in a lot of the issues, it may be a housing challenge, but it's related to community and neighborhood quality and livability, for example. So you see a number of those questions related to not just the housing itself, but the neighborhood environment and the quality of that. And so all of those are related and important aspects to keep together as we look at this. So we have to look at it in 360 degrees. Housing is not just a housing challenge. It could be a pedestrian, it could be a service, parks, other things that relate to that. And so we don't want to ignore that in the process. And looks like all of you are very in tune to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the folks who are on the call who may not know what NIMBY is, it's not in my backyard. And so that's what it's, it stands for. And then there is also groups that say YIMBY, which is yes in my backyard, which is really the antithesis of that. And so when you see the term NIMBY, NIMBYism, it's, the folks that may say, no, not, I don't like, or not in my backyard, so to speak. So the YIMBY folks, on the other hand, would be more supportive of housing and other issues related to housing.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Dave. It looks like we have some comments too about opportunities for moving into the home buyer market, whether that's young partners, young couples, young families, or just individuals who are looking to move from renting to more stable home ownership. There's that middle housing that might be missing. So that opportunity for upward mobility in housing options, definitely something to consider. And I want to reiterate as well that the city has developed a survey that will be live next week, and it touches on a lot of these topics. So that's another really great place for you to go online and provide additional feedback that maybe, is you're participating now, it's sparking some ideas and you have some more thoughts to share. That's a great place, and we hope that you take that survey.
And you can see on the bottom right of the screen, I want to clarify some of the the words that we use. It says POC there, that's persons of color. Racism and classism are real problems. What it's saying, it's they're associated with persons of color. So that's a reference there for those folks who may not know.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and the housing element addresses affirmatively furthering fair housing. So it takes a look at a variety of issues or factors that go into barriers to access to housing for everyone in the community, but specifically some of those protected classes that Dave talked about. So, the city really does take that into consideration, and there's a big analysis that goes into that. So the more you provide your experience, the more information the city has to kind of develop that analysis and how it influences housing in the city of Huntington Beach. So answers are slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and move us on to our next question. So we've thought about your experience. We've thought about some of those challenges. What are some of those issues that you see? Now we want to take it one step forward and ask you what your ideas are. So this could be in the realm of, how do we create or provide access and opportunity for housing now for current residents? And it can also be thinking about the future of Huntington Beach. So maybe you have children that want to move back home and live here. Maybe you're thinking of starting a family and you'd like to remain in Huntington Beach. What does that look like for you or for your family or for your community? What are your ideas for housing and to create increased access and increased housing opportunities in the city of Huntington Beach?
We can all identify challenges, and what is a challenge? It's just an opportunity in disguise, right? And so we want to make sure that we can look at those. And if you think of your responses here, look at future policy and action that we can do to positively address some of those challenges. So think of you as you're responding in these questions, that it provides the ability for the city to start to create policies and programs that address some of those issues that are important to you. You'll have plenty more time to get into the details of this, but in a short amount of time to do this, to do the best that you can. But it looks like you're doing a great job so far.
Yeah.
And you see on the screen, it says ADUs. Those are accessory dwelling units. And so if you have a single family house, it's another living unit that's accessory or separate from that main dwelling. You also have junior accessory dwelling units that are part of that equation too. And those are connected to that building that you currently have, for example. And then the ADUs are changes in the law requires or allows a lot more flexibility than in the past for the development of ADUs in the community. So it will probably be a very important aspect of generating affordable housing opportunities in the community as we develop the policy program.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so some recommendations for mixed use zoning. So that's just allowing the development of both residential and housing in the same vicinity. So creating walkable spaces. It creates housing very close to economic opportunities or some essential retail like grocers or markets. I see some recommendations for acquiring strip malls or maybe even parking lots. And again, that's a big part of the analysis of the housing element, as what Dave mentioned earlier, is taking a look at viable land for housing opportunity in the city. And that's definitely something to consider. Some, again, recommendations for ADU opportunities. So those accessory dwelling units, taking into consideration that there is a student population in Huntington Beach. So thinking about housing for students.
There was a comment about the 13,000 units and maybe this is just a point of clarity for the folks who have not participated in prior RENA processes. The numbers that we are seeing in Southern California are extraordinarily higher than they have been in the past. And so the numbers of growth needs throughout the region, and especially in coastal communities within Southern California, have seen a market increase in that assumption. As the governor had stated in their housing goals, is that it's a stretch goal. So we've gone above and beyond what some folks might characterize as being reasonable, but to the extent that we can change that ship has sailed. And so it's the city's obligation in the process to plan for that. To the extent that they will actually be built, that remains to be seen, but the city is obligated by the law to provide for the accommodation of those units should they be built in the next 8 years.
Great, thanks, Dave.
And it certainly isn't an issue without controversy. So I think we're all understanding of there's going to be very different opinions on that growth need, and we want to make sure that we understand where everybody's coming from on that.
All right. So again, just a reminder that all of your responses are going to be recorded and they will be available for you to go back and take a look at or review after the workshop. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question. I think we just have 2 more. So this one's a multiple choice. You can choose as many as you think apply. But the question is, what are housing types that you're interested in seeing in Huntington Beach? So there's a lot of different options here. They take into consideration a variety of household types, a variety of residents that might live in Huntington Beach. So take a look at that list. Let us know if there's any housing types that you think that Huntington Beach might need more of. There's single
more
family.
than one, Molly?
You can pick all of them if you want to, but
Okay.
yes, you can pick more than one, or you could just pick a couple. Senior housing, so the consideration of allowing people to age in place and opportunities for accessibility for persons maybe with physical disabilities. We think about student housing or affordable housing. Maybe that's just to young working professionals, young families. I saw a comment earlier about single parents. So, considering everyone when we think about this analysis and these future opportunities.
Don't look like we're seeing anything
I
on the
know.
screen.
I don't see anything showing up right now. And I'm not sure why.
On our end, it says, please wait for the presenter to show the next slide. So maybe that's the reason why.
Thank you, Oscar. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Teamwork, right?
Yeah.
Collaboration gets you places. We appreciate that.
There we
Look
go.
at that.
Okay.
Wow,
Quick
you got
fix.
that's a nice split. That's pretty interesting. Look at that. And
Okay,
then as
so
you
now
start to
everyone
add,
should,
as you
yeah.
start to add that, you can continue. You'll see that those pie slices continue to change. So
Mhm.
if you wanted to add another comment on there, you'll see those numbers change.
So it looks like primary interest in affordable housing. And we know that this can come in all shapes and sizes. So maybe you said that, you know, more apartments are needed in the community and, you know, a portion of those could be affordable. Maybe you're thinking all of those should be affordable. But affordable housing, it looks different for every person that needs housing, and affordability looks different for every person. It's not a set number. It's generally defined as about 30% of a person's income going towards housing. But again, that's very different, maybe different for a teacher, and maybe different for, you know, a restaurant or retail worker. There's also an interest in student and senior housing, as well as supportive or transitional housing. So providing housing that helps people move from maybe an unstable housing situation to a more stable one, providing additional resources and support to get people into permanent housing situations. So it looks like everyone's responded to this one. So our next question builds off of this one that we have on the screen now. It's also multiple choice, and you'll see the same options on the screen. But instead of choosing all of the options that you see here, we would like for you to prioritize just 3. So if you took a look at that list and maybe you selected all of them because you think that Huntington Beach just needs more housing, we ask that you pick 3 to prioritize that you think are most important and most needed in the community. So I see affordable housing, single family or multi-generational housing, and townhomes and condos having most of the votes right now. And then just to let everyone know, multi-generational housing is generally single family housing in shape. And what it does is it provides opportunity for families who want to live with different generations. So maybe your parents, as well as your nuclear family, or maybe extended family, nieces, nephews, cousins. So living in a multi-generational situation and making sure that a housing unit is large enough and sufficient enough for that type of situation. So lots of variety in our responses, but it looks like affordable housing is being given the highest priority. This is great. I think we'll leave this up for just another minute or two, let everyone have a chance to respond. This is our last question. And we really, we do appreciate all this input. All your feedback is really important to this process as the city moves forward in updating the housing element. Okay.
Molly, they'll be afforded to have some ability to have some dialogue at the conclusion of this.
Yes.
So don't worry, if you're itching to say something, we'll let you say that in a minute.
There is time. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this live polling survey. Thank you so much all for participating, for hopping online and working with us through that little technical difficulty that we had. All right. So we should be back on the presentation. Can everyone see next steps on the screen? Great. Okay. So next steps for engagement. Like we mentioned before, lots of opportunities, and we appreciate and we kindly solicit your participation in this process. So again, there is another workshop that's coming planned for the summer. There's also an online community survey, again, that will be live next week, and the city will advertise that link on the city's housing element update webpage through social media. So you should be able to access that fairly easily. There's also City Council and Planning Commission meetings where you can come and participate, as well as a review of the public draft. So as the city moves forward, they develop the draft housing element, and that's released to the public for you to take a look at and read through and kind of digest, and then up for discussion at workshop number 2. And again, the city has developed the housing element update webpage. That's where you'll be able to find the most recent, most up-to-date information, whether that's when's the next workshop, when's the next opportunity for participation, or just some general background information about the housing element. I would recommend that you go to the housing element update webpage. So speaking of the update webpage, you can subscribe to updates. So there is an email blast list. So just some quick instructions on how to access that. I'll go back really quickly. If you go to huntingtonbeach.ca.gov/housing-element-update I think you could also probably type in Google Huntington Beach Housing Element Update. It'll probably be one of the first return searches. It'll take you to this web page. Go ahead and click on one of the information tabs that you see in the picture on the left-hand side. So just as an example, we pulled up the submit public comments. And then on the right-hand side, that little module, you'll see subscribe to housing element update. You can click on that. This box will pop up that says subscribe to our housing element update. You can go ahead and enter your email address and then just hit subscribe now. And you will receive an email with the most up-to-date information, any invitations to future participation efforts. So make sure to utilize that. Let friends and family know that if they'd also like to be a part of that email blast, that this is the place to go. And then finally, the survey. So the city has developed a survey. We've talked about it a lot. It's going to be live early next week. And again, the city will advertise this. So there should be a lot of access, a lot of information on the survey coming up next week. But we do want to walk everyone through this, just really quickly show you how to take it. It's very simple, very straightforward. There will be a link that is on the city's housing element update webpage. So if you go there, you can click the take survey link. It will take you directly to the survey. And again, the survey is available in both English and Spanish. So it will appear exactly as you see it on your screen on the right-hand side, that image. So you'll just go ahead, click that little check button to begin. The first page is just a welcome slide, provides a little bit of background on the housing element update, the process, and then you can start to click through, make sure that you read all the instructions on each of the slides, read through all the prompts as completely as possible, and then respond to them as completely as possible. Share your ideas, your input. It's a quick survey. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, if you want to be super thoughtful on it and share a lot of your ideas. There's a lot of place for additional comment and a lot of space for you to really share your feedback with the city. Once you get to the final, oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, finish. I'll add into the end, just let me know.
So it's only 5 slides. Once you get to the final wrap-up slide that you see on the right-hand side of the image, you'll answer some very simple demographic questions and then just go ahead and click finish and you'll submit all your responses. Go ahead, Dave.
And we want to express to all of you that are participation. So we have a favor to ask. And if you could share this information with your neighbors, your colleagues, other stakeholders in the community, it's very important for the city to hear your voices, to get the information from you and learn from that. And so if you could do us a favor, we put in the chat the link to the website where you can find this. Share that with your friends, colleagues, and all of those you think are appropriate to take part in that survey. We'd really appreciate it. On behalf of the city council and the staff and all of the folks in Huntington Beach, we would much appreciate that. So please do. Molly?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Okay. So this is all the information that we are going to be giving to you tonight. Again, as Dave mentioned, there is some time for Q&A at the end of our workshop, at the end of this presentation. There is an email on the screen, so if you have follow-up questions, or maybe you don't have a question right now, but something comes up in the future, go ahead and reach out to the Housing Element Update team using the email that you see on the screen, which is housingelement@surfcity-hb.org. You can send your questions or your comments to that email. At this point, we're going to go ahead and move into a Q&A portion. If you'd like to stay, if you have questions, please feel free to do so. If you don't want to participate and you want to head out, I know there's still some evening left in you. You can go ahead and do so. This is really all the information that we have to share with you. And again, everything is going to be recorded. So you can always come back and watch this presentation at a later date.
And then Molly, for the folks on the using the chat function, we've responded to a number of those already. For those we haven't responded to, we will be able to do that. We're saving all this chat, so we'll be able to respond to any of those questions. And it looks like a number of the comments are in there. Patricia Goodman, for example, and Jessamine, Linda Rose, you've had some comments that we can see on that. These will be saved, so we have access to this in the future. But we see a number of folks who are starting to raise their hand, and so we're gonna call your name. And I don't know if Molly, you can do that. If you can call the names,
Yeah.
and once you do that, just put your hand down so we don't call on you again, unless you want to have another question. So be patient as we walk through that, and we'll start off with who, Molly?
All right, I see Patricia Goodman had her hand up first. I'll go ahead and ask you to come off mute.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm going to ask you to repeat again the statement about the RHNA allocation. And it sounds to me like it's aspirational. And I think there's confusion among us that it's going to be required to meet this. Could you repeat it, what your statement was about the RHNA allocation? Because it is, I mean, to most of us, 13,000 units seem daunting over an 8-year period. And some people may even think, oh my God, that's it could be the first year, or, you know, how do we do this? And then using comparative data is helpful too, like compared to the last cycle, how does this stack up? And I guess there's concern also about it being just plain old fair. Why does Huntington Beach have this kind of number, and Seal Beach or Westminster, you know, our neighboring cities are quite a bit different. So how do we explain that to people and get a good grasp of what the thinking is behind it? So, oh, okay, I can explain it now, or live with it, or this is crazy. So I think it's really important for us to have a clear understanding of that, how the numbers come about, and take it seriously, and that these were done through a process of by our elected officials. It just needs to be clearer to people's understanding, I think. Mine is especially.
And I don't know if staff wants to start off. I can certainly provide my comments, and just let me know if.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So you're right. The RHNA is super complex and super difficult to understand. The SCAG staff spent, you know, probably a year and a half to determine the methodology that created the RHNA. And so those are some terms you'll hear thrown out there as methodology and factors and all these things that went into creating or generating that 13,000 number that was assigned to Huntington Beach. So if you go to the housing element website, there is a tab called housing element and RENA resources. And there's a PDF to the SCAG adopted 6-cycle RENA methodology. And it's a 30-page document. So, you know, just some light before bed reading if you have insomnia. But there is an executive summary on the first page, and there is a handy chart. And basically the Cliff Notes version, SCAG generated this methodology. It divided the need, and the need for the SCAG region is 1.3 million units that was given to us from the state. And when you say the state, that's basically the state planning department, housing and community development. So the state gave SCAG 1.3 million units, and SCAG needed to determine a methodology to divide up those units amongst their 197 jurisdictions. So to do that, they divided it up into projected need and existing need. And there's a few factors that go into those. Some are transit accessibility, accessibility to a job center, as well as household growth is something for projected needs. So you can look at the document and see all the stuff that went into it. And they also included equity adjustments. So there's a additional equity adjustments for areas with high resources. And that's one of the factors that contributed to Huntington Beach receiving many units. So Huntington Beach is many census tracts that have access to highly ranked schools and economic opportunities. And, you know, that it's hard to explain because those that economic adjustment, those high resource areas have their own whole host of like 15 factors that go into determining what makes you a high resource census tract. So all those factors mixed in together is how SCAG popped out the 13,000 unit number to satisfy the projected need and existing need for housing within the city. So I know you had like a 12-part question. I think
you got to most of it, Nicole.
Okay. Yeah.
And
But,
for Miss Goodman, there is a link, and for the other folks in the chat, of the resource that Nicole is referring to. So if you click on that link, you save that link, that will provide you with that information.
And I also wanted to know, you did ask about, I do remember you asked about comparing Huntington Beach to the other cities. There is a document on that page as well called SCAG 6-cycle final RENA allocation plan. So that shows the breakdown of units allocated to each jurisdiction within the SCAG region. So if you want to compare Huntington Beach to Westminster or Newport Beach, Garden Grove, Long Beach, it's all in there.
Right. My other, it was in the chat, was comparing or providing comparative data in the first few slides that you gave us as far as the demographics, like how does Huntington Beach as a percentage compared to Orange County, compared to the state on those demographics. So if there's, I mean, it appears that we're not very diverse in our demographics of ethnicity and don't really reflect the state and county demographics. So is that a factor that goes into it as well?
If I can answer that, Nicole, as part of the first component, the work that we do, we'll do all of that demographic and econometric analysis. And a lot of that analysis is comparative analysis. So we'll look at past, future, past, present, future.
Yeah.
And then we'll look at in comparison to local jurisdictions. And so we look at housing growth, we look at population growth, we look at ethnicity and race and all of those different factors that pull into that. Much of the work that we're doing is required by the law for us to analyze. And it really
Mhm.
tells the story because Huntington Beach in and of itself is unique. And there's all a bunch of different knobs and levers that we have to pull and push, et cetera, to get to where we need to address our community needs. But in order to do that, we have to do exactly what Pat and those folks who are interested, we have to be able to provide with that data. And so when we do the draft of the element, you'll see the community profile and the resources and constraints analysis will address exactly those issues.
So it'll compare our demographics to the county and to the state?
Generally speaking.
Okay, okay,
Thanks, Dave. Thanks,
thank
Nicole.
you.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead. I think in order of operations, I saw Mr. Selkinson was next. If you want to go ahead and come off mute and ask your question.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my wife's watching Jeopardy. I had to mute it. First of all, I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I appreciate you guys explaining some of this stuff. I don't want to come off as Debbie Downer, but with the 13,600 housing units looming, our ideas of what would be good for housing in Huntington seems a little bit like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I find myself, when I talk to people I know who live here, and I've lived here 48 years, my wife and I make a really good living, but we can't afford to buy houses here. My parents live on Yorktown and Magnolia. I have friends who bought a house recently on Adams and Magnolia, and for over 1.5 million. They're talking about tank farm affordable housing. I mean, the idea of affordable housing is crazy. My wife and I are renters, and we have a great deal where we live, but it's just because our landlord's really cool. They could get more for the place we live. So while I appreciate there's nothing wrong with getting information, the more data, the more decisions, the better informed the decisions we make. But what I'm trying to figure out is, until I know our city council has mentioned that they're working through legislation to maybe knock down this 13,600 thing. But I mean, are we going to look like Biscayne Bay with 12-story high rises? I mean, like I said, I've lived here 48 years. I don't know where we're putting all this housing. I mean, it'd be great for there to be affordable housing, but what's affordable? I mean, for a 2-bedroom apartment, can be, depending on where you live, can be thousands of dollars. I'm sure all of us know, I live near downtown, but it seems like they all use the same architect. It's these 3-story, they take one lot, they split it in 2, and they make 3 stories out of it. And these houses are selling for 3.5 million. I don't know I don't even know what the definition of affordable housing is. So I don't know how we're coming up with this calculation. I saw that Casey McKeon is part of this thing, and he's made some good points on these subjects. And someone like a couple like my wife and I just find ourselves on this, like, in this weird middle ground where, compared to the rest of the world, we're in great shape. But like, I can't buy a house in Huntington, and maybe I'm not entitled to, I don't know. But when we talk about affordable housing, someone was saying the other night in the meeting about these companies want people to be able to live in Huntington so they don't have to drive so far. The Cambro Corporation, I was in the restaurant business for 30 years, operates right over here off of Clay Street. I guarantee you people who work there don't live in Huntington Beach. So I'm just curious what the what the city's idea of affordable housing is. Sorry to go on and on a little bit, but I'll just end it there.
Appreciate that comment. And really that's the, as we develop that's that question you just asked, Eric. What is affordable? I think that's part of when we start looking at policies and programs, your comment would be to help us define what that means to the Huntington Beach community. Is that a fair assumption? Thank you, sir. Enjoy Jeopardy, by the way. Shaka bra. All right, Molly, who do we have next?
Okay, I think I'm going in order, and I'm sorry if I'm not, but I'm going to move to Miss Jackson. I see you have your hand up, so go ahead and come off mute.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for a great presentation. My question is sort of an addition to what Pat has, and I just need clarification on the comment that you made kind of midway through the presentation, where you said that the RENA allocation is over an 8-year period, and we just have to provide the opportunity for the private market to do so, but it does not have to be built. But Huntington Beach is still required to provide this plan. So that's part of my question, just clarification on what was that statement that you said. Actually, do we just create a plan and it's a check off, we did it, but we don't have to build according to those 13,000? And then the second part of my question, based on the 4 income levels that we were given, with the 13,000 units, if we are to build, where do we start with the building? Do we start with low income, very low income, or do we start with the above moderate income? Those are my 2 questions. One's a clarifying.
Nicole, I can take that if you'd like me to.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Sure, and thank you, Gigi, for the comment and for the clarity for the RENA. And the issue is the city is not a developer per se, so it doesn't build housing units, but the private market does. And so if the city is not a builder, what can they do? And I'm saying in general, what can a city do to help to bring that to market? And that's the policies, programs, procedures, efficiencies in bringing an idea to an actual doorknob or a housing unit. And so when we talk about housing, the policy is the city has to establish the ability for those developers or those folks who actually build housing to be able to do that. And so if the city in the process just said, we want to build 13,000 units and we'll figure out that later, that's not enough. It has to show the requisite zoning and available sites and the policies and programs to support the development of those 13,000 and some odd units. So when we talk about the city doesn't have to build those, it's not the responsibility of the city as a developer to build the units, but it is still the responsibility of the city to help to facilitate the development of those 13,000 units. And that's that marrying of we'll call it the profit, nonprofit and for-profit sectors married with the city's policies and programs to achieve that objective. So you can give me a thumbs up if that clarified it a little bit. Thank you so much. And then on the other question about where the priorities are, we don't know the answer to that question yet. And so that's what we're going to discover in this process. But if you think of all of that spectrum, when we showed the RENA numbers of very low, moderate, and above moderate, the challenge is, and when we talked about the lower portion of the spectrum, that's something that needs a little more assistance or help to bring the market. For example, if you had an average price of, say, 300,000 for a one bedroom condo in the community, but the cost to construct it is 400,000, right? You know, to be affordable, there's that gap that we have to shrink and make disappear. And so that's where the challenge in the lower end of the spectrum occurs, is that it needs some help, some guidance or some incentives to help bring it to market. Whereas the above moderate, in some cases the moderate, it's just the market demands. You put up a for sale sign, somebody's going to come and buy it, and it naturally does that as part of the natural market. It's the lower side of the spectrum that needs more policy and programmatic help to bring those to fruition in the future. And so when you think of the policies and programs, you probably won't have a lot related to above moderate and all of that. You probably have more so on the lower side of the spectrum. So to the extent of where the city is going to focus its priorities, that's, you know, the council will ultimately decide that, but we'll provide through this process some guidelines to help them to understand that a little better.
Thank you.
So that second part is to be determined. I apologize for not having the answer, but it's just too premature to say that at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi.
Okay, so moving on, I see Mr. Hanson. If you want to go ahead and come off mute.
Hello. I wanted to ask a question and then I have a few comments. My question, I think, is somewhat related to Ms. Jackson's questions. It was basically how long the housing element lasts until, if approved by the council. I'm referring to the current one or the future one.
I can take that. So that would be a plan for 2021 through 2029.
All right, that makes sense. I would have a few comments. I would say, first of all, that one of the things that I think is good about the PowerPoint that you can't really tell, but I was able to do some addition with it, is the fact that the combination of the very low income and low income units are more than the above moderate income and also the moderate. I think that's something we're going to need. We really, to be honest, need affordable housing of any type. One of the things I found a little frustrating about the survey is it said, do you want home, apartment, or affordable housing? And I'm thinking, well, we just need affordable. If it's a home, if it's a group of apartments, we just need to get an increased level of affordable housing. That's really all we need. In terms, and I also think one of the concerns I see lately, and this may be a personal preference, you know, it's people's living options are rights. But I think one thing we're starting to see more is couples living together, meaning father, mother, son, daughter. And I think actually realistically, we could be heading to father, mother, son, daughter, in-law, grandson, granddaughter-in-law pretty soon. I think that in part has to do a lot, not necessarily with the housing supply, but with honestly the housing price. Lastly, I would say that if possible, and we don't know what things are going to be like in early summer, but if possible, I would urge the city to consider having the second, I don't know what you guys are calling this, the second town hall or community workshop, be in person if possible. I think it would be a real disservice to the citizens of Huntington Beach if the second one was done virtually for an what is going to be an 8-year implementation on their lives, particularly if it is permitted by then. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Yeah, thank you for those comments.
And then Molly, can you say who's next and then who's on deck so
Yes.
they know they're coming up next?
Yes. So Mr. McKeon, I think you are next. And then I see Miss Laura Sire, you will be on deck.
Hi, this is Casey. Thank you guys so much for putting this presentation together. It seems like on that initial first couple slides you guys showed, And the U.S. Census data proves this, that the HB population is basically stagnant and growing very little over the next 20 years. We have a majority aging demographic, so it doesn't seem like we actually need more housing supply. So it appears that SCAG is mandated that we need more affordable housing. So my question is, how do they expect us to deliver affordable housing when essentially we have no more land to build single family, so we must go vertical? So how can we deliver affordable housing with high density units when they're buying market price land and building vertical with exploding construction costs? I know there's density bonuses if 10 to 15% of those homes or those units are affordable, but now we're talking about 85 to 90% that are at market or above market, like as in Bellatero, where most of those units are 3,000 plus a month for a small 2-bedroom. So where I'm not saying you guys will know this, but where is SCAG coming from? What's their terminology and determination of how we deliver this affordable housing based on all those factors?
You asked the question that probably the whole region is asking at this point, especially Orange County and coastal communities. And there's the challenge that we have is when we look at projections and other things, and they come in conflict with some of the data and the other projections, it creates questions. And so, for the process of the RHNA and determining the number, that ship has sailed. The city did go through a process of appealing those RHNA allocations, and the city, as well as many other jurisdictions in the, with the exception of two, a county and a city, Pico Rivera and the county of Riverside, were able to appeal their numbers to a lower. So in effect, what happened is the city appealed, and all the other cities who appealed actually got a few more units out of that process. So what I'm getting at is the numbers for RHNA for the growth needs those are set in stone. If there is any future litigation related to that, I can't predict that. If it's as a regional process through SCAG, through the Orange County specifically, with the Orange County agencies, we don't know. We do know that it's being paid attention to, and there are going to be challenges related to expectations of growth as it relates to the current trend in demographics, not just in California, but in Southern California, with a lot of people moving out, for example. It's changing the demographics within the community. So all of these things that we have to pay attention to. You ask a number of more rhetorical type of questions, and I think those are things that need to be talked about in terms of the policy development of the program. So I do appreciate your insight, Casey.
Thank you.
Molly, you're on mute. There you go.
Oh boy. We'll move on to Laura.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yes, thanks again for your presentation. It just seems, I have to say, it always brings up a lot more questions for me, and then there's great questions, and then it's like there's more questions, but maybe that's normal. But I wanted to return again to what Gigi was asking about. I'm still not very clear on exactly what has to be shown. I guess it's October. That's another question. Is that when you have to come up with the plan? The deadline is in October, is that correct?
The due dates for housing elements for the 6th cycle, which is 2021 to 2029, is October 15th of 2021.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And so, and who, what entity does SCAG look at that, or who's the one who just says yay or nay or whatever?
It's the State Department of Housing and Community Development. It's HCD.
Oh, HCD.
And yeah, and so it's if you wanted to go to their website, it's www.hcd.ca.gov. We'll put that link in the chat so you can access it. So anything you'd want to know about housing elements and requirements are there. Again, if you have insomnia and you need something to to help that out, that might be a good read. But it is informative to give you a lot of that information. It's a very complicated process, but the city is obligated, and all the other jurisdictions in the SCAG region have to have that October 15th deadline. There is some exceptions to that number in terms of a grace period, if you will. But during the assumption in the schedule that we have is that it will be considered by City Council sometime around that October 15th date.
Okay, and then the last thing is you're referring to the council. It's like, is what exactly then by October 15th, you said, Dave, that the zoning and policies, procedures needed to be in place to show that that these units can be built. That's the way I understood it. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me clarify that for the folks. And so think of the general plan housing element as a policy program. So in and of itself, it's a statement of actions. And so what that means is it expresses, here are the things that we're going to do. When the city has to address unaccommodated need, or say, for example, today we don't have enough sites to accommodate this growth. So we have to do rezones, or we have to do overlays and other things. There's a 3-year period that is afforded to jurisdictions to accommodate the implementation of that. And so the day the housing element is adopted, there's a 3-year window that the city would have to, what would be provided to adopt and address those, the new zoning or other changes in land use policy, for example. So there is some additional work that will be done, but think of the housing element as a statement of future actions to address those needs. And so in the case of sites and related to sites, it's a 3-year planning, or 36 months from the date that the city council takes action adopting the housing element.
I see. Okay, that's really helpful. So they don't have to have it all done by October 15th.
No, and you know, it's you could do that if you wanted to, but in this case that will have subsequent actions that will happen, implementing actions for the housing element. So the policies that we develop in this plan will essentially say, here's what we're going to do, here's the timeline that we're going to do it, here's the resources that we're going to do to help to fund that as we progress through the planning period.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments and your questions. I think we just have one more hand up, and that's Mr. Hanson. So go ahead and come off mute, please.
Was that a left up hand from Mr. Hanson? And looks like there's a
Sorry,
mismatch.
I'm here.
Oh,
I was on
okay.
mute. Sorry. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What I wanted to say is in response to what Mr. McKeon said earlier. He talked about a decline in population. And I think one number that unfortunately we don't have yet that we really hopefully will have soon, because I think it's important when we consider this housing process, is the population numbers for the 2020 census. Those are the most exact numbers in terms of not only the nation's population, but our state's population, and going further into subdivisions, including Orange County and Huntington Beach. And I really wish we had those numbers as we were here today. I think it would help a lot. Hopefully we'll add them by the next one.
Thanks so much for your comment. We actually have one more hand up. I can't see your full last name, so Elizabeth, if you can go ahead and come off mute.
Hi, sorry, it's Hansberg, Elizabeth Hansberg. I wanted to just pick up on something that Mr. Silkinson said, and agree that yes, the affordable housing for low and very low income are definitely the ones that need the programs and the policies to support bringing them forward and making them turn into doors, no question. But as far as, moderate income and above moderate income for, teachers and nurses and, people that find themselves in that, quote unquote, too poor to be rich, but too rich to be poor, middle income
Missing middle, they
bracket.
call it.
There you go. The city can do a lot. The city can do a lot. It can streamline the permitting process. It can get rid of arbitrary and, really just giving into NIMBYism. I mean, there was a project recently, a condo project that would have created some missing middle housing. And there was, people basically invented reasons to object to it. And then the city council, not the current council, the former council, directed staff to, find reasons to have a problem with it. And it all happened in the public forum. So the city actually can do a lot to streamline the process, to put together a zoning code that is specific, that tells developers what they need to get their projects approved. And then when they stick to the rules, approves those projects and doesn't let it go through, 7 public meetings and, a million different discretionary review processes. Because in the market rate and the above moderate and the moderate income, supply absolutely is a factor in the cost. There's no question. And scarcity, when you have scarcity of anything, it drives up the price. And so I'm hopeful that, those policies and programs will be there to support housing for low income folks. But I'm equally hopeful that, the process to develop will, get tighter and, in terms of like regulation, that they'll effectively free the market to do what it's supposed to do, and which is to provide housing. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. So I'm going to go ahead and do a last call for any questions or comments. I'm going to bring us back just to our information page.
Yeah, I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you. Please go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering, I haven't heard anything about who's doing the environmental impacts, the impacts on our quality of life.
Did we lose you, Mr. Rains? The last we heard was quality of life. Molly, did we lose him?
No, he's still on. That may have been the full question. I don't know if he can hear you.
Mr. Rains, if you can go into the chat and make sure that we got your question, because you seem to have cut off. We want to make sure that we captured your question or your comment. We apologize if we didn't get it.
I think we lost him, Dave.
Well, we have his name. We can follow up with him, and hopefully we'll be able to get that. So everybody remember, Raymond Rains had a comment. We want to make sure that we address that. It doesn't look like there's any additional comments in the chat, Molly.
No, none.
Okay.
Oh, just really quickly, Eric Selkinson, I see you have your hand up. If you want to go ahead.
Thanks. I'll be super brief. Just, I could kind of, actually, sorry, let me mute the TV again. I apologize. So when you was talking about quality of life, and I see this a lot from residents in a lot of the forums and people I talk to, and Casey's mentioned this before too. There's those words, we want to protect our suburban beach community, and we don't want to be Long Beach, and we don't want to be this. And part of me understands that ship sailed a while ago. Like I said, I've been here 48 years. I remember what, it used to look like from Beach Boulevard to Golden West on PCH. So yeah, we're not a complete suburban beach town anymore, but I do hear from people in Southeast HB and stuff that we just don't want to, as much as I love Long Beach as someone who went to Cal State Long Beach, people want to be a bedroom community and they don't want any building. And I'm on record as I don't like that development, Elon and some of these different ones, but I understand we're going to have to strike a balance. It's just the reality. But from what I hear from people, and I ran for city council last time, so this is a huge conversation. Anyone who's lived here for over 25 years, they want it to stay exactly how it was. So I'm guessing that's what he was talking about. And like I said, I get it's a tough balance to strike, but I don't think people want to see more of those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-story housing developments. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm done for the night. Thanks, you guys. Like, once again, I appreciate everything you guys have done tonight. It's been super informative.
Thank you so much for sharing. I do see Raymond Raines has rejoined. Raymond, your question was cut off for us. I want to give you the opportunity to go ahead and come off mute. Just ask it maybe one more time.
Okay, I'm sorry, my
No problem.
connection dropped off. I was just inquiring about, are we making plans to do environmental impacts, quality of life assessments, doing studies on how do we provide the infrastructure for these new units, provide police, fire and paramedics, water services, garbage services, electrical grid, since a lot of people are going to electric cars now. Those things have to be in place if people are going to live in this city. And I see the plans of mandates for numbers of units, but I don't see any plans supporting anything like this kind of development. And I wonder if these studies are being done, and if they're not, who's supposed to do them? What's going on?
I can answer the question. Is part of the development of the housing element, it's a chapter, a section of the general plan, and is adopting this as policy requires the city to evaluate the environmental impacts of those decisions. So the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is the process that is required in the state to evaluate the impacts of the program. And it's a programmatic EIR, Environmental Impact Report, that will be developed for this process. And it's or amended or however it may end up being. But as part of that, there is technical studies and other analyses that will occur in terms of traffic, transportation, services, utilities, and all of that. We're required to look at the potential impacts of the environment and the mitigations to reduce those to less than significant levels. So the city council cannot take action without certifying the environmental document that is accompanying it. So as you go in the future, a city council meeting is they will adopt by resolution the housing element amendment, and they will adopt and to certify the environmental document that accompanies that housing element in this case.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know, but I'm an engineer, so I think about system engineer, so I have to think about these things. And, you know, we have a very sensitive environment here with the wetlands, and all that housing is going to impact these wetlands that are supposed to be protected, you know. And so I'm wondering, you know, I'm worried about this stuff. We love our wetlands. We love our Central Park, and we love our eagle in the Central Park now. And we want to continue to be able to see these birds and animals come back. And so I'm really concerned. We're not like Garden Grove. We're a coastal community with wetlands and very sensitive environment. both marine environment and our wetlands environment. So to impose those kind of numbers on us seems to be irrational at best. And I don't see anybody pushing back on our environment and the effects the buildings are going to have on our environment. We are kind of a special community. I'm sorry to say that, but we are. We're different than Garden Grove. We're different than these inland cities, and nobody's taking that into account. And it is really concerning me. I want to hear more.
Well, it looks like we lost Raymond again. He was coming to the crescendo and then he jumped off. So we can follow up with Raymond. Hopefully, I think we have in the chat, we have his contact information too, so we can certainly follow up. Molly, did you want to go on to the final
Yeah.
slide in respect to the timeline here?
Yeah, I know that Mr. Hanson does have his hand up, so we'll go ahead and make him the last person to speak this evening, and then we'll close out. Mr.
Yeah,
Hanson?
I just want to bring up one more point in regard to Professor Silkinson's comparisons to Long Beach, and that is in relation to the issue of public transportation. The reason that Long Beach, as a coastal city, as well as most of the cities in Los Angeles County, are able to have that level of capacity of development is the fact that they have trains and bus rapid transit, light trains, heavy trains, etc. We are going to need those eventually in Orange County if we are to have this level of development. Quite frankly, given the amount of development proposed by most regional housing needs allocations, the whole state's going to need it. Unfortunately, it's taking time. The transportation authorities have not really made an effort on it. And that's not something the city really can control, but it's something that the transportation authorities need to address eventually. I remember once hearing a speech by Antonio Villaraigosa, who's the former mayor of Los Angeles. Suffice it to say, he had a pretty bad speech day, and he accidentally said by the year 50-50 instead of by the year 2050, we should have public transportation in all of California. I'm not entirely sure his prediction is a 50-50 is not more realistic though now. So that's it on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry I dropped out again. I don't know how far I got before my connection dropped, but the point I was trying to make is that we're different than other cities, being a coastal community, and we have very sensitive areas like the wetlands, and that kind of development is going to have a tremendous impact on our wetlands. And I would like to see studies done on that, and that fact taken into consideration. The other thing is that we live under a earthquake fault line. Nobody talks about the fault, the Inglewood Newport Beach fault that goes right under our city. And that has to be taken into account too. Those are realities that have to be taken into account. I don't think the other cities have a fault line like we have. And in the earthquake of 33, like 140 people died. And that was when it was not very populated. So who's taking into account these factors? Is all I want to know, you know? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, sorry about dropping. Sorry about dropping out all the time. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, we appreciate your insight. We took copious notes, and it was in 3 parts, but I think we got it on the whole. And we appreciate your comments, Mr. Ray.
These are serious concerns that I have. Being an engineer, I have to think about all the different factors and systems that go into a development like this. And it seems like all I've been hearing is, hey, we got 13,000 units, and the ship has sailed and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, hell yes, there's something we can do about it. We're not gonna let this destroy our city and our sensitive environment that we have here. We want to preserve our wetlands. We love our city. This is why we live here. I've been here 56 years. So, and I want to die here. So I don't want to see it go to hell.
Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you for your participation tonight. Molly, I think you have a last slide that you were about to start.
It was just this one. I wanted to go back
There
to
you
some of
go.
our contact information. So yeah, again, thank you everyone for participating, for a productive workshop, for using all the Zoom features like raise hand and chat. Again, as Dave mentioned, this meeting is recorded, so it will be available on the city's webpage. All of your comments and your questions have been recorded. The city is also planning to produce a fact sheet with some Q&A, or I'm sorry, I guess FAQ, frequently asked questions, and some basic information about the housing element. So you can expect that soon as well. And then, yeah, just finally, the email that you see on the screen, the housing element at surfcityhb.org. If you have additional follow-up questions or comments that you'd like to share with the team, please go ahead and use that. And with that, that is everything we have for you this evening. Thank you all so much for joining, and we hope that you have a great night.
Thank you so
you.
much. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Don't
take
forget to
care.
register on the website so we can keep in contact and see your beautiful smiles. And again, take care.
Hey Molly, do you want me to stop recording now?
Wait just a moment.
Just a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, once everybody comes off.
You can kick me out. I can't figure out how to leave. Oh, there. Sorry. I found
Good
No
it.
worries.
night.
Have a good night.
Take
Bye.
care. You can stop recording now.
Okay.